Right, ladies and gentlemen, what happens when meat meets tech? From texture and taste to production, what are the new technologies transforming alternative proteins? Well, it's time now to find out through our next sit-down panel discussion. Please give a very warm welcome to our first guest. We have Chris Bryant, who is the director at Bryant Research from the UK. A very warm welcome to Chris. Great to have you here. Thank you so much. Next up, we have Florian Pichelmeier, the CEO of Signature Products and board member of the European Hemp Association from Germany. A very warm welcome. Welcome to Florian. Next, we have Tilen Travnik, co-founder and CEO of Juicy Marbles from Slovenia. And our next panelist is David Young, who is the CEO of Green Monday, all the way from Hong Kong. And now rounding out our panel, ladies and gentlemen, is Patrick Huber, the founder of Sayari Ventures Kenya. A very warm welcome. Right, Chris, I'm going to start off with you. Now, we've had a lot of scene setting, haven't we, over the past couple of hours. Always a very good thing to get the data and the insights and everything else. You are a part of a marketing agency covering how people feel, essentially, about this newly emerged product category. So tell us about some of the results within your research. I mean, we've talked about trust, environmental impact, taste, et cetera, Tell us what you found.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thank you to the organisers for inviting me, and thank you for the thoughtful question. So we're a research company that does social science on alternative proteins and looking at what matters to consumers, and also looking a bit at the policy and regulatory side and how that can play a role. I'll touch on three things quite quickly. The first, many people have mentioned price and taste as those top two factors. There's a little bit of discourse last year kind of challenging this conventional wisdom, but I think that there's evidence that price and taste are still, king and queen of consumers' food choice motives. Right, improving those things on the margin is going to be where the value is. So if you're a company deciding whether to spend your next development dollar on making your products taste better or be healthier, it's likely to be more worthwhile to make it taste better. Now, that's not to say that there wouldn't be value in other things. There can be kind of diversified products, such that some are, very affordable, but perhaps less tasty and healthy, and others are very healthy, but perhaps quite expensive and not that tasty, and so on. So there can be some trade-offs and some diversification to be had here. And the second thing I'll mention is about ultra-processed foods, which I'm sure people have heard a lot about. My main point on this, and perhaps we'll go into this more, is that it's really a misleading categorization, an attempt to put all foods into four categories that are meant to correspond to healthiness. In fact, the NOVA food classification framework, in which some foods are considered ultra-processed, was developed as a socio-political framework. And it marks foods as ultra-processed if they have characteristics like being produced by a big company and being intensively marketed and having attractive packaging. None of these things have anything to do with health and nutrition. Right now, that framework has been kind of appropriated to talk about health and nutrition, but it's a very imperfect way of doing that. Again, there's not only four levels of food healthiness, and there's, of course, massive diversity within those categories. And the last thing I'll touch on very quickly is about policy levers for moving away from animal products and towards alternatives. The first thing that a lot of people think of here is meat taxes, which, although that probably would be quite effective, is also terribly unpopular. Voters generally are not going to vote for any kind of tax on meat. There's been some suggestions of doing carbon taxes or saturated fat taxes, which would also capture meat. They're kind of like a stealth meat tax, you might say. But there's lots of other stuff that you can do from a policy perspective in terms of production and consumption conditions, like animal welfare standards, that kind of thing. Providing information, for example, through national food dietary guidelines, that kind of thing. And then also there's a ton of interesting behavioral interventions that you can do, nudges, to encourage people to choose more sustainable options. So, for example, putting the meat-free options first in a buffet setting, you get a higher percentage of people choosing them. Presenting the meat-free options as the default, where there is some kind of default. You can still request the meat if you want to, but by default it's going to be plant-based. These kind of interventions are not unpopular in that they don't really limit people's choices. They're just designed to nudge people towards the more sustainable options. So price and taste, most important factors. Ultra-processed, not a very helpful category. And policy, lots of things that you can do beside meat tax. Thank you for having me.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Brilliant update there. Tylen, I'd like to quickly move to you, if I may, very quickly. Sure. Now, you represent a startup called Juicy Marbles. Yeah. And my question for you is, because you're a startup, and we know that this sort of sector is becoming highly competitive now, how is your project in particular trying to be unique, and how are you finding competition in general? Is it quite tough, or is it quite an open market still?
Thanks for the question, and thanks for allowing me to be here. By the way, I have a competition for the best question in the end. There's a limited edition hoodie that I'm offering.
Oh, nice.
So,
that's a good incentive, yeah.
Yeah. So having listened to most of the lectures this morning, I'm actually quite positive, and I'm going to weave in how our unique points have evolved over times, and why I think we are actually on the right track. So as any technological startup that's trying to impress what I would call tech investors in 2021, we obviously emphasize on tech. So our core was basically achieving long fibrous texture, and we were the first startup to actually bring plant-based steaks on the market. So not minced meat products, but rather something you cut into, there's fibers, you chew through them, there is this distinct feeling. This was a strong, let's say, core value to us, to basically understand what makes meat products so great, so desirable, and what we can do to basically not replicate meat as meat by meat, but like replicate the components, the vectors that actually drive the experience. So the first part was the texture, which we kind of invented our own thing, and then this led to the products that we have today. The second was choosing for what kind of a setting / purpose you are developing your products. A lot of the companies opted for settings that are common, that are your lunch, your dinner, your burger, your nuggets, your but that felt to us like battling a really hard game, getting the price right, but also not disappointing with the experience. So we said, let's try and go for something that's more premium, not because we want to make, because we want to make more money and more margin to be able to survive as a small startup. So that's why we went into premium cuts. The third thing we noticed is that, yes, it's going to be an extremely long game. And that's why one of our co-founders is actually a branding specialist, and basically he opened our eyes, all the other three are tech people, to the importance of the brand when playing a long game. And Rugen Waardemühle being a great example, we also have a red logo, so yeah. But we now see how much of an effect brand has, because we have loyal customers that are buying our product on, and even if we launch something new, there's people who are lodging. And the final thing that I think we are unique, the brand, the experience, not just the sensoric experience of the product, but also how it looks, how it cooks, what people think of you when you eat this product in a social setting. The whole experience is really important. That's why we are basically doing products that are meant to be at the heart of social experiences. That's why the steak, that's why the ribs, that's why the rib even has the gimmicky edible bone inside of it, which, yes, you can eat, but it's more there to kind of be a, let's say, something that tries to enhance the experience of the product.
And so what's the feedback been like so far then for these steaks that you can actually cut into very quickly?
The feedback has been amazing. I mean, this is unofficial data, but we've been told that we are apparently the best-selling plant-based product in Tesco, looking at the first 6 weeks. Nice. So that's a huge achievement for us. And overall, we see a lot of repeat purchases. So all the adoption data that, if you ask investors, what they think, they tell you, well, it's like slow. But then if you talk to industry experts, they're all, wow, where did you get this number? So it's like this mishmash of, in the investor side, looking at, oh, you're not moving as fast, although we 3x our revenue last year. But then the expert side, so the retail and the food industry insights are like, you guys are doing something great.
And as you mentioned, brand is very important, trust is very important, which is the whole point of a brand, right?
Exactly.
So David Young, very nice to have you here. Now we heard earlier from Tao Zhang about the sort of China market. Mm-hmm. So just focusing over in Asian countries for a moment, there are a lot of traditions, there's a lot of sort of conservative tastes because of traditions over in Asia, but there's a lot of diversity at the same time as well. Do you think the Asian countries are actually ready to adopt this type of new alternative proteins?
Well, first of all, pleasure to be here. Are Asian countries ready, and what are the opportunities? First of all, I think from a culture standpoint, for many countries around the world, there is a journey. Whether you're talking about even in Europe, in the US, and certainly in Asia, different countries in terms of culture, how they interpret meat reduction and then replacement. Indeed, I think the last few years, especially with the pandemic, that also has a huge impact. But what we do is much broader, and we think that also is one of the ways to crack the opportunities. Even though we have a base in Hong Kong and in Asia, but what we look at is a lot of not just plant-based food for the Asian market, but Asian food for the global markets. In fact, that is one of the biggest and most explosive category in the world. Meats or plants, doesn't matter. We're talking about just from an international flavor standpoint. Today, we're very proud to say that under the Green Monday Group, our brand called Omni Foods, we're in thousands of points of sales in the US, in the UK, and growing rapidly. And what buyers, and as much as what a lot of us here, we are obviously working on food innovation and how to champion this change. But what we, of course, need to listen is, what are the buyers looking for? What are the consumers looking for? And for example, we are in Walmart in the US and about 2,000 outlets. And just about 4 months ago, I think it was back in October or November, we were invited to the headquarters and just say, hey, what are the emerging trends? What are they looking for? They are not necessarily looking for, let's say, in this case, plant-based. However, the number one mega trend they see, and this is for the US market, is international flavors. Okay. It's international flavors. So yes, burgers, nuggets, of course, will sell, but the flavor profile or the palate profile of general consumers are diversifying. So, one night they could be having pizza, next night could be having sushi, and then the night after could be ramen. So international flavor is a big thing. So under Omni, we are actually not just innovating. Of course, a major part is on the protein itself, but then the additional layer that we are also working on is the application. So whether we are talking about meats or vegetables, they do not stand alone as just one independent item, right? So when we have fried rice, it's actually 5 or 10 ingredients inside, or pasta or pizza for that matter. So we are actually working on a lot of ready-to-eat or ready-to-serve items. And that works for whether it's end consumers, B2C, or B2B food service partners. So out of Hong Kong and growing globally, some of the biggest restaurant groups in Hong Kong, we've been working with McDonald's for 3 years and counting. And then in about 5 to 7 markets across Asia, Starbucks, IKEA are among our biggest customers. And we need to do a lot of customization for them. So the IKEA in Singapore doesn't want the same thing as IKEA in Thailand or Hong Kong. And even within mainland China, I always like to say that southern part of China doesn't have the same taste profile as the northern part of China. So I think for us, we need to constantly do 2 things. One is, of course, from a product innovation standpoint. And then on the other side, it's just listen to the market, listen to the customers and buyers, and say, what do they want? So I think Omni, going through our evolution journey, is we have a very international team and working on very international market. Of course, we know food is absolutely global. So we are proud to say that despite some very serious, adversity with pandemic and lockdown and all that, but today, Omni is growing our global presence, and in many of the Western markets, we are kind of representing kind of the more expertise with the Asian and international flavor, but plant-based just happen to be, an element of our product. But that international flavor is what appeal to many of the buyers.
I suppose, as you said, the health benefits are like that really nice add-on, basically, as well.
Exactly, yeah.
Right, let's take a look at the plant-based proteins that we haven't discussed yet. Florian, over to you. Now, your company produces products from hemp. You really are an expert in this field, so tell us a little bit more about what you do, and how did the choice in this particular plant protein even come about, and what sort of prospects are there around this segment?
Yeah, thank you for the invitation and for being here. I want to ask one small round first, and I'm going to answer your question. I would like to know who actually knows here that you can eat some parts of the hemp plant. Please raise your hands. A few people, yeah, I guess that, because it's quite new, especially I guess here in this area. So why do I hemp? It's a really deep question actually, because it's what I do in life. It's all about hemp the last 7 years. And I discovered hemp 7 years ago, and I found out it's a powerhouse. Hemp actually has straws where you can generate fibers for the construction, textile, and automotive industry. Nearly every big car brand in Europe has it included in some of their cars. You can use the seeds for the cosmetic and for the animal feed industry, but also for the food industry. And as I'm really passionate about food all my life, because I'm a really sensitive person to food, so if I eat something which is unhealthy, I feel it really fast. I was really looking into that and what the hemp plant actually can do. And I found out that hemp seeds have a lot of beneficials for our body. So the omega-6 to 3 ratio is really great. It's mostly 3 to 1, sometimes even better. We did researches with a couple of leading universities in Germany, University of Hohenheim for agriculture, and looked into that. We saw that it has all essential 9 amino acids inside, and it's also rich in protein, up to 70%, rich in fiber, and a lot of other benefits. And especially the plant itself is really completely aligned with our values in terms of sustainable agriculture, because the plant itself needs much less water than a lot of other crops. And also, is officially confirmed by the European Union, it's contributing to basically achieving the European Green Deal. So this plant is amazing. But now you can maybe ask yourself, like, okay, this plant has so many benefits, it has so many applications, but why is it not out there? And the problem is just what we have seen in the beginning. Not many people know about it. So there has to be a lot of education done. And that's what we're doing at our company. That's why I'm also not just in the company, but also in the management board of the European Industrial Hemp Association, and trying to talk to politicians to get like government grants for European companies. We also received one together with Rügenwalder Mühle, which I'm really happy about, where we're researching together about applications of hemp in food. And I'm really thankful that it's going in the right direction.
As you mentioned, it's all about collaboration and investment, the science, the research, the consumer, the trust. It's a whole sort of ecosystem to get things done, isn't it?
Yeah.
Patrick, last but certainly not least, of course, your company, Sayari Ventures, is a Kenyan startup, and you fund projects that cultivate seaweed and you restore coastal and marine ecosystems. So tell us a little bit more about what exactly you're doing and some of the drivers and developments, especially over in Africa. What's happening in Africa actually as well, and how are they taking to alternative proteins?
Yeah, good. Thanks so much for the invitation. Yeah, Sayari Venture, we have one of our companies is called Mawimbi. We're a seaweed farm as a service business for the coastal communities in Kenya and Tanzania, and we want to link seaweed businesses with and seaweed farmers with global buyers. Yeah, very interested to talk more about alternative proteins with potential collaboration partners here. Look, I think I read the question, and I think the African continent is still far behind where other continents are. And so for me, kind of thinking about alternative proteins and innovation, and to bring money to the African continent, I think we need to take a step back and say, what's the condition for innovation? And I think we need to have a mind shift that Africa is, the place of famine and warlords and child soldiers, to it's actually the place of the future. The African continent, the population is doubling in the next 25 years. Africa will be 2.5 billion people. Every fourth person on this planet will be African. So therefore, it will be very crucial with the population growth that we find opportunities. And we need to start with a mind shift to saying Africa is actually the lively continent. It is the youth continent. And so therefore, the drivers, I think, that Africa will be part of this alternative protein innovation is, well, it's a huge opportunity to have 2.5 billion people. 70% of them will be young. So you have a young consumer group that you can change. And the second is, thanks to the economic growth, so 6 out of the 10 fastest growing economies are on the African continent. So we will get a middle class. Projections are middle class is growing from 2010 to 2050 3 times, from 320 million people to 1.1 billion people. So we'll have a lot more middle class, which typically comes with a lot more requirement for proteins. So it's a huge opportunity for everyone in this room to come to Africa and find ways to offer alternative proteins.
Take a look at the opportunities in that market, definitely. We've got 12 minutes, and I'm not going to be selfish. I'm going to hand over to the audience for some questions. I'm hoping all of you can answer a question, so please do make sure that everyone gets to answer something. We have a gentleman here who put his hand right up immediately. So if we have some microphones, please do hand those over. Do we have any microphones at all? I was hoping we had a couple of microphones like we did earlier. If not, you might have to shout. Any microphones in the back there? Yes. So we have a gentleman just here. And yes, please do tell us who you are and where you're from and what your question is. Thank you so much. And yeah, pitch in if you have any other sort of ideas as well.
Thank you. Gerard Alfiel, Proxima Strategies, Dubai. I have a question to David Young. Actually, I have 2 questions, please. When will you expand with your product to the region, UAE, GCC? And second question, there is this very good culture in China. Then when you finish your meal in the restaurant, they wrap it up, the rest on your plate, and you take it home. Can't you export that good culture to the region where there's still a lot of food wastage, unfortunately? Thank you.
I think in terms of eliminating or reducing food waste, this is something that the whole world needs to tackle, because as much as we're talking about how to create a more sustainable protein supply chain, I think the first thing we can all do is reduce food waste. So indeed, I don't think it's just necessarily certain habits from, let's say, China or certain Asian countries, but this is something that we should all actively work towards. Now, in terms of our product coming into both UAE and GCC, well, we are in the process of getting our halal certification, and we do expect that will be done very shortly. So the short answer is, within this year, we hope to bring Omni products into this market and really adding the diversity, both from a food service standpoint and from a retail channel standpoint. But I think more importantly, besides saying we bring our products here to this market, is we are actively looking for partners and want to listen to, just how can we bring our know-how, our technology, and our skill set to work with local partners here. I mean, this is not just to say, okay, these are the 16 different products that we have, whether it's 16 or 60, and please buy from us. I think more importantly is to really listen, with every culture, every region in the world is clearly, taste profile and consumer preference are different. So what are the things we should customize? What are the things we should do for this region that will ensure that these products will have the highest chance of success of adoption, both whether it's a food service channel, and even under food service, we are making it very general to say food service, right? I mean, while a burger chain is different from a pizza chain, it's different from an Asian noodle chain, for example. So talking to a Din Tai Fung is not the same as talking to a Pizza Hut, obviously.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think those are the things that we're actively looking for here in this region and globally.
Brilliant. Any other further comments on the relationship between food waste and alternative proteins? Is there a correlation that anyone would like to sort of talk about a bit further?
If food is good, there's less waste.
I suppose you could weigh it up like that, yeah. And it's how much you put on your plate, of course. That's the issue with a lot of us, including myself. Gentleman in the front here, do tell us who you are and where you're from. I think there was another question at the back, which we'll go to afterwards as well.
Yes, Matthew Robin, Board of Bioengineering and Migros Group in Switzerland. I had a question on maybe to Chris and perhaps David, nomenclature. At the moment, we're seeing the alternative protein area mainly nomenclature mimicking meat or dairy product names, milk or steaks or whatever. Do you think this is going to change? We see in the UK, again, initiatives to try and stop it. And is there an opportunity to develop our own category?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you for that. And one of the speakers earlier was highlighting that we do perhaps limit our thinking if we think of what we're making as plant-based meats. I think somebody said similarly that the first car might have been called a motorized horse, right? It's like, it kind of is, but there's more to it. I do think it's a useful term at the moment because it allows us to map onto consumers' existing understandings, right? What is this product? It's a meatball. Well, you know what a meatball is, and it doesn't matter that much, right, if it's not technically a meatball in one sense of the word. Another part of the answer to this on nomenclature is that there are seemingly perennial, ongoing efforts to restrict this kind of labeling through legislation and regulation, right? So to say, already in the UK, you can't find any oat milk in the supermarkets, only oat drink, right? This is generally being advanced by the other side, if I could put it that way, on the basis that consumers might be confused by this kind of terminology, which is not an argument that I believe in, frankly, right? We have products in the UK. We have one at the moment. There's a decision ongoing as to whether they'll extend bans on the use of oat milk and other similar terms to encompass more terms. And there's a product sold in the UK called This Is Not Milk, and it is being challenged on the basis that consumers might think it is milk. So it's always seemed like that particular argument kind of against adopting this nomenclature has always seemed a little disingenuous to me. I hear what you're saying there. There could be other reasons to want to establish a category of our own and so on. And I think that probably is something to look at in the longer term. At the moment, I think we have a situation where consumers roughly know what is a meatball or a burger or a sausage, and using other terminology is likely to actually increase confusion in the short term, I think.
May I chip in?
Yes, please do. Anyone, yeah, feel free to chip in.
Going to the next segment of this conference, talking a lot about culture, cell cultures. I think, once there are hybrid products on the market, so products who are maybe mainly plant-based but include a certain amount of actual animal fat or actual animal cells, what's the point of having the nomenclature discussion then? Because, even from like a allergen standpoint, if something contains fish cells, it should be called fish, right? Or, you know, so I think it's a transitional period where, yeah, we are moving from the horse and a carriage to a car. But I think that the pushback is clearly motivated by, like you said, the other side who doesn't see a way to collaborate in this yet. Well, some companies, obviously, like you had, do.
Really well said. Any other further comments? Very quickly, we've only got 5 minutes left. I want 2 more questions before we go.
A very quick answer also to that is, I think, you know, the early stage of this kind of new development of this field is, you know, a plant-based beef burger, you know, that is beefy in flavor, but not beef. But at some point, I think we also need to really think, what are some of the original plants or non-meat, non-dairy products that we can really boost, right? So coming from Asia, or particularly China, actually, I mean, they are, like, we are the, you know, there's such a wealth of diversity of, let's say, fungi, and thousands of different types of mushrooms that are heavily, still very untapped opportunities. But if we're talking about how to fortify, how to enhance, and how to bring fungi into the formulation, then this is not necessarily trying to duplicate or replicate beef or chicken, but rather is to bring something that a lot of people still haven't experienced, but create something innovative and natural from it. So, I mean, plant-based or alternative, I think, is still very broad, and there are a lot of untapped opportunities.
Funny you mentioned fungi, because algae is another one of these very much sort of untapped areas. So maybe you could tell us a tiny bit more about, you know, the opportunities that you're looking at.
No, I think the interesting part about algae is that some researchers calculated that if we would farm only 2% of our oceans, we could produce all the proteins that we need today. So it is a huge opportunity. You don't, also from a sustainability point of view, no irrigation, no fertilizer. So it's, yeah, it's a big opportunity, but what we learned today in the earlier sessions, from idea to really supermarket, it takes a really, really long time, and we will need to find the money for the long game.
Spreading awareness, isn't it? Right, 2 more questions. I have 2 more minutes left. Yeah, we have a gentleman at the back there. If we could just get a microphone to him. Tell us who you are and your question, please.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm John Michael Apostola, and I am a student here in UAE. So I just have a question for all of you guys, since I'm just curious of what you're going to answer in this question. So based on your answers earlier, have you thought of advertising this new improvements instead of comparing it to the already existing meat? Why not advertise it in a different manner? People would surely appreciate it if you put in a unique way instead of replacing the already existing product. Do you have an alternative way for advertising these improvements? Yeah.
Well, it's a good question, isn't it? Right, who would like to go first?
Now, I think that would be another 45-minute panel. The alternative marketing for alternative protein.
Exactly, yeah, well said. Any other sort of comments?
I think food is, you know, tradition ingrained in our deepest parts of our brain, and that's a hurdle of its own. So, you know, trying to make it something new and breaking traditions is just something that, yeah, in the end, I guess we'll get there. But right now, I think comparing is a better way.
And meat, I presume the majority of people, is the most delicious thing, though, isn't it? And it's trying to replicate that with taste and texture and, yeah, moving it away from meat. But anyway, right, a couple more questions. Who would like to take our last question? Gentleman just over here.
Hi, this is Wa'il from Dubai Refreshments. I have a question. I think Mr. Thomas mentioned a while ago that plant alternative is water consuming, while Patrick mentioned something about algae and seaweed doesn't need water. So why are we going to have manufacturing facilities for things that consume resources and there is a scarcity, while other things like seaweeds, and you have a big sea here that can be really utilized for such, alternative. Why nobody thought of having seaweed and algae here in Dubai? Is that something that people are thinking of from the people here, or I mean from the company at least Patrick is representing?
Yeah, I think the topic is really how do you get from the idea and the testing pilot to a ready product. And I think, as the other Patrick rightly mentioned, kind of algae is still in the pipeline of future protein sources, and so it will take some research and time. But I think it could be one of the research projects for the UAE, I would assume. So government funding, I think, would be probably quite favorable for the topic.
And final question, actually, for Florian, just very quickly, because you didn't get an audience question. How are you looking to scale this type of protein up, though? Because, I mean, is it going to be a long process? Is it a matter of awareness? I mean, as you saw, not many people in the audience sort of really knew. So what are you doing about that, and what are you seeing generally when it comes to that sector?
So I think it's the same as with like the transition of the names of the products. We need to be a little bit more patient, and it's same as with hemp. As mentioned, hemp has this amazing thing that can be used for so many ways, but also the negative side of it. If you only need the seed, or if you only use the seeds of the plant, you have all the other parts left over. And to make it actually more like attractive for food companies to implement it into their food price-wise, then we need to use the whole plant and not just the seeds. This means we need to grow all the sectors I mentioned already, so it's a huge project. And this is why I'm doing a lot of education. We have to talk to people from all industries to basically take all the parts of that. And that's why it's a really big project. So how to scale it? I'm talking to some big companies in Europe who have access to a lot of fields, who can actually grow, who have access to like food supply, what we also do, who supply. One of our investors is a company who invests in, who supplies a huge market share of like cosmetic and animal feed industry. So we need all that to be able to scale actually, and we need to be patient. But I'm not that old yet, luckily, so I still have a bit of time to do that, and I'm super happy to push that forward.
Some great advice there. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Sadly, we have run out of time. If you do have any further questions, we do have another break coming up. So in the meantime, thank you so much. Thank you.